Thank you, Vipka, and thanks for the organizers for inviting me to speak to you today a little bit about starter grants and building your pilot data. So I think the majority of you in this room will probably have undergone your postdoctoral, your PhD or MD, or in the process of it, and come at the end of it thinking about you might want to have an academic career. And you'll be telling your supervisor when they ask you that age-old question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself obtaining an independent research fellowship, whether you believe that or not. But the difficulty is actually kind of understanding how you get from A to B, how you kind of start to get some research independence. And it's very difficult at the, let's see. Oh, what's that? Have we got a pointer? Here we go, sorry. There we go. Okay, so when you're at your kind of PhD, early postdoc, you're at this stage where you're just kind of doing what your professor wants. And maybe intellectual freedom is actually a myth as you progress up the ladder. But it's very important to develop some independent funding. And that's an absolutely crucial way to start to develop some research independence and allow you to kind of follow up on your own research ideas. Why is it important to obtain funding? I mean, obviously, from a first instance, it's very good to pursue your own independent strands of research, take a leap out yourself, and try and test and develop your own ability to develop your own research ideas and follow them through. It's very important to get some funding to provide you some experience of managing research budgets, delivering to deadlines, and actually managing research staff as well. Very important for collaborations, developing collaborations which could suit you, fit you very well in the future. And it also proves that you're just not merely doing your supervisor's work, which funders want to know that you're actually developing some independence. Writing grants, obviously an important thing, and develop your ability to write grants. And also show that you can deliver, show that you're a finisher, improve your CV, and actually make yourself more competitive to obtain more substantial funding in the future. So how do you obtain funding? So you have an idea, like this chap here, which maybe has come as an offshoot from your PhD or something like this, but you've got very little in the way of pilot data to back up your hypothesis. You feel that you can't go to a major grant funder with a research fellowship because your grant committee here, this is a typical grant committee, that you'll find that they will be feeling that you don't have enough pilot data to back up your hypothesis. They might be saying it's pretty speculative, they can't do that there, he's not got a track record. So you need to try and change their mind. And obtaining small grants to develop this kind of pilot data is absolutely crucial to addressing the weaknesses and maximizing your chances of success. And it's important to think of the 3 Ps. Are you the right person to do the right project in the right place? And that's what you can use your pilot data for. So you use to develop your own career, show that you have a track record in science. That if we can't do it, the techniques there, that you can bring in the technique and actually do it. And show that your hypothesis, that you've actually got some pilot data to back up that hypothesis. So what are starter grants? Starter grants are primarily aimed at junior and intermediate level researchers. This is something which was recently launched a couple of months ago for the MRC Interactive Career Framework. It's maybe not come out very well. But you've got your kind of training when you're doing your PhD, and you've got your consolidation, exploration, and progression as you kind of go through the different stages of career. And it's those kind of 3 areas, 3 stages that they're very interested in funding people for starter grants. They generally provide modest budgets, generally between £10,000 and £100,000, and they're for up to 2 years duration in terms of the project. They're very much for generating pilot data which will enhance future kind of fellowship and major grant applications. They're not for projects that you've been doing, that you've run out of money, and this is to finish off a specific project. They're not to fund that kind of thing. So they have to be designed and written with a kind of very much specific project in mind. How are you going to get from A to B? I'm going to do this project over 6 months for a specific MRC deadline, for example. So how should you use your starter grant? As I say, you're not expected to fully answer your major research question. This is just to actually kind of prove that your hypothesis is likely to be correct and the feasibility of your research. So the studies themselves shouldn't be overly ambitious. You're not going to claim that you're going to make a knockout mouse for your gene of interest and characterize it in 6 months and sort it. You might be thinking that you're going to take some in vitro cell model, try and knock it down a little bit and prove your hypothesis for then the main knockout model in your subsequent applications. The majority of starter grants are used to kind of provide consumables budgets to do your pilot data. But they can be used for other aspects as well. Some schemes will let you buy kind of small equipment to let you potentially set up a novel technique that's not done in your institution. You can fund some travel around the world to kind of develop some international collaborations, or actually spend some time over there, develop a specific technique that you'll need to answer your research question, and then bring it back to your home institution. And some schemes will also allow you to kind of have some salary costs, not for you, but for some support staff, technical staff, without which you might not be able to do the project, or they will make sure that it happens more quickly and efficiently. So who provides starter grants? So I've kind of divided it into kind of three headings. You've got national, which some of the schemes can be divided into clinical and non-clinical researchers. You've got kind of disease or specialty specific funders, and local and institutional funding. And I've put up the MRC Interactive Career Framework again, because in addition to having a careers page, they also have a kind of funding streams page. And at the bottom, it hasn't really come out there again, but pilot projects are there, and you can click on that. And all these bodies have kind of gone in collaboration with the MRC for this, and it shows all the different funding streams available. And I'll just touch on a few of them today, but obviously the list is not exhaustive. So the first one I'm going to mention is the Wellcome Trust Seed Award Scheme. So this is for basic and clinical researchers. So they're kind of classed as early and intermediate stage. So you're post-PhD, and you have a salary from an institution or a research fellowship which is not associated with substantial research funding. So maybe more likely to be an institutional fellowship. They come up to £100,000 over 2 years. And the main remit for this is to develop new ideas to make them competitive for major grant applications. And they have a particular stress in their applications about wanting to fund particularly cross-discipline research. They're pretty generous with what you can do with your money. They provide consumables, equipment, salary, and they will provide travel subsistence costs, including overseas work in other institutions, for example. And I've just been looking, in the 2 rounds they had in 2016, they've already funded just over 50 projects, so they're funding quite a number. And the next application deadline is March next year. So if you're eligible, it's something very much to think about. For the clinical people in the audience, we know that there's a number of people with clinical lectureships across the UK, and it's been well known that they come with salaries but no particular research funding. And the Academy of Medical Sciences noticed this a number of years ago and decided, in collaboration with the Wellcome Trust, to kind of put forward a scheme to try and address that unmet need. And they came up with the Clinical Lecturer Starter Scheme. And you can see on the bottom left, a number of other funders have actually kind of joined this scheme, and it's become very large over the years. So this provides up to £30,000 over 2 years. Provides you consumables only. And since 2009, they were very nice. They showed us some of their data. That they've made over 300 awards, and the success rate is just under 40%. So they're, in terms of actual kind of funding, is pretty good chances of success here. While initially, when I looked at the kind of institutions that have achieved the greatest numbers of funds, it might be the usual suspects you feel here, but on actually looking through the data, it's mainly because they put in the most applications. And the actual chances of success from applications are fairly similar across the board. And actually, Newcastle, Cardiff, Glasgow are the 3 most successful institutions in terms of percentage of getting funding. So they fund across the board, across the UK, so I'd encourage everyone to apply to these schemes. Additional kind of non-monetary benefits of this scheme is that they allow access to the Academy of Medical Sciences career mentoring network. And there's some evidence that people who join the mentoring scheme are more likely to achieve independent fellowships and greater grants. And that's very invaluable. And they also have access to kind of clinical lecturer meetings for networking and things like that. Next round is January next year. In terms of basic science, the Academy of Medical Sciences have also got this Springboard scheme in collaboration with the Wellcome Trust. This is for slightly more senior researchers. So these are for people that have kind of already achieved a level of independence or have a research fellowship without substantial funding, so less than 75 grand per year in terms of consumables that they've already got. You have to be in the first 3 years of your position, but again, you can get up to £100,000 over 2 years. And again, in terms of what they provide, it's very similar to the Wellcome Trust Seed Discovery. You can use it for many different things. And you've got access for the mentoring and career development program as well. They have one funding round per year, which has just kind of gone, the preliminary application, and they funded 19 people in the last year, so quite a number. Diabetes UK used to fund early careers for clinical and non-clinical, but they've obviously joined the clinical lecturer scheme, but they're still running their scheme for basic scientists. Now, of course, as it's just for research into diabetes, this is slightly less competition than the rest of the specialties together. They're a slightly small funder. They've only funded kind of 3 in the last year, but they're still a suitable scheme and provide up to £15,000 for consumables and travel awards. And their deadline's just coming up as well. As I'm talking for the Society of Endocrinology, they have 2 schemes as well. They've run the early careers scheme for a number of years. This is for clinical and non-clinical, people who are up to 10 years post-PhD, and they provide up to £10,000 for 1 year. And it is primarily, again, for obtaining preliminary data that will go into kind of major grant applications. And crucially, they kind of use for short-term salary. Me, myself, when I got this award, I was invaluable to be able to kind of get a short-term technician who could actually run the studies while I was actually otherwise indisposed. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to generate the pilot data. So it's been very helpful for me in this scheme. And they've got a deadline at the end of this month, along with their deadline for an equipment grant, which they've also got for newly appointed kind of researchers who are aiming to start up their lab and kind of get in equipment to kind of start growing their lab. So the deadlines for those are very similar and something to help. The one thing mentioned about that is that you have to have been a member of the society for at least 6 months before you apply for that scheme. So I would recommend that you all join, and then you can apply for May, for example. Other thing I wanted to quickly mention is the Career Development Workshop, which is run by Gareth Lavery and Marie Friel in February, and they actually kind of give you some training on actually how to write grants and prepare for fellowship applications. And I think that's people who've been on that have found it invaluable experience, so you can look on the website for that. Final one, just mention a wee bit about institutional local funding. One I was going to mention is the Wellcome Trust institutional support funding. That's just been renewed, and it now encompasses 31 institutions across the UK. So the Wellcome Trust have kind of given funds to different institutions, and they can do with that, to a degree, what they wish. And a lot of institutions are trying to use that to kind of help people get extra pilot data in support for new applications. And so I would certainly encourage you to have a look at your institution to see if they're part of that, and see if that falls within the remit to apply for those schemes. The MRC have also got a confidence in concept scheme as well, which they've started, which is very much looking at translational research. And again, that's very much for developing pilot data towards more substantial funding. So I would certainly encourage you for that too. Of course, at all your institutions, there will be local charities. There will be, institutions will have their own kind of endowment funds and things that you can look at to find your own other ways of finding starter grants. But there's often a lot, around if you look for them. So I'll stop there, and I'll just acknowledge the funders who gave me a wee bit of access to their data and thank you for listening.